Hello and welcome to Access to HE Medicine. We're looking at one of your study skills units, and we're looking at the first session of your portfolio, which is all about making notes. So the learning outcomes I'm focusing on is learning outcome 1, to be able to extract, summarize, and make notes. And the criteria which you'll be addressing in your portfolio will be to complete some accurate and coherent written summaries from sources of information from the lectures that you probably take in this course, or maybe some videos that you're asked to look at as well. And then there'll be a part where you'll be looking at notes for revision purposes, but I'll be doing a little bit more about revision in another session. Okay, so first of all, why take notes when you're studying? Well, it does help to sort of filter out all the information that you've got, and it helps to sort of draw the key ideas that you're studying to the surface. Sometimes you can have a huge amount of information, and your notes, if you don't have any notes, it's sort of impossible for you to retain everything. Um, Even if your lecturers very kindly sort of filmed the lecture and you can watch it a million times, you still need to take some notes from it because it's the only way you can get your thoughts in order, really. When you're reading a textbook and maybe doing some research for an assignment, it's really useful to take notes as you go along, because otherwise you'll be constantly going backwards and forwards to that textbook thinking, what was that again? What was that again? So you do need to draw some notes. Also, the actual writing of notes, whichever way you do it, actually helps to sort of stick some information into your head. So it comes in very useful when you're preparing for your revision, or just, as I said, writing an assignment. They're very important for study, and you can also use them for creating your own questions. Maybe you work in a study group with some other students. You can pull out your notes and do questions. You can use your notes to write flashcards for revision, etc. What are the tools for note taking? Well, the easiest one is a pen and a bit of paper, really, isn't it? Um, some people prefer to handwrite their notes. Some people nowadays wouldn't dream of handwriting their notes. It's incredibly personal, really. But I would say, and I've said this to many students that I've taught, some listen, some don't, that if you are actually handwriting your notes, please, please invest in a book to write them into, rather than any old bit of paper that happens to sort of appear in the desk, because I can guarantee you that in a couple of months' time that bit of paper will be somewhere else, or it might have gone under your coffee cup, um, but it may well not be where you want it to be. You can also, with handwritten notes, you can expand quite a lot with coloured pens and highlighters. I I swear by my beloved highlighter here, and I often use it when I'm making notes to study. Yes, believe it or not, some of us still do study, no matter how old we are. And I find it really important. But I also use the little coloured sticky tags as well, and they're quite good if you've got lots of notes, and you can sort of stick them up, and you can have like a colour for a topic. If you're taking notes digitally, which a lot of you guys probably are nowadays, um, a laptop is very useful, and I think very often, although it's portable, it's often easier to take into a classroom than using your mobile devices. It's usually easier to get the formatting done, and because of the size of the keyboard, it's quite easy for you to be watching the screen and typing. Uh, Quite a lot of people nowadays are very fast typers, so they find that using your notes digitally work better. A lot of people are using their tablets, which is quite handy because you've also got your S Pens as well, which can help you sort of make sort of indication. And they can multitask quite a bit. You can have a few screens open as well. I find it really difficult to take notes on my mobile, even though my phone is sort of quite large. And I have taken notes at some conferences, just quick notes, but I find I can't take a lot of notes, probably because, you know, I'm not the best typist on the screen. I'm not that quick. Some people younger than me may be a lot quicker. I can work with my tablet. I just don't find it that easy because I think you're squinting and you're not focusing really. But you know, each to their own really. There are quite a lot of note-taking apps now, Windows, Android, Microsoft OneNote and Evernote are ones that I've used quite a lot. When, as I said, I do use some note-taking apps. Usually, though, I use them for when I'm just thinking of ideas, and I use them rather than if I was listening to a lecture. I would probably be watching the lecture and making a few scribbles instead. So let's think about some of the tips for taking notes. You need to understand the big picture first. You need to sort of give an idea of the overarching structure of the concept. So if you're dealing with something, say, in medicine about a certain illness, you need to maybe have an overarching understanding of that illness or make a few sort of rough notes about that, and then things can lead off from there. Don't try to copy verbatim every word that the lecturer is saying. That's nigh on impossible, even if you are a super fast typer. And you won't really learn anything because you'll be so frantic about trying to get every word down that you know you won't be listening to it. You're actively listening to it. And you know it's almost impossible to keep up anyway. So you'll end up getting panicky at the end when you've been so busy trying to remember that bit that she's moved on and then a whole chunk's gone by and you're not there. So you really need to sort of dip. And it's much more important to write in your own style and your own language. I mean, obviously, don't change the wording so much that the meaning's wrong, but you need to write things the way you think of them. And it's much better to summarize and paraphrase in your own words than it is to constantly repeat the lecturers. Okay, and you will get more confident with that at the beginning, especially those of you who are doing sort of science subjects. It can be a bit daunting. You think, oh my golly, you know, all this terminology. But you will get to know it, and it will become second nature to you, and you won't be so panicky with it. Keep all your notes in one place. That does sound a bit obvious, but unfortunately, it's probably one of the students, all the students that I've worked with, it's probably one of their greatest mistakes is that they don't keep their notes that organized. And when it comes to revision time, about 9 months later, they don't know where it's all gone, or hematology is in with the skeleton, and the muscles are somewhere else, and carcinoma is in the bit where it shouldn't be. So do try to keep that organized. Obviously, if you're doing it digitally, it's not too painful because even if you have documents, you just need to spend the time out organizing them maybe into files and folders, and again you need to do it in your way because it's got to make sense to you. You know how the way I would create files and folders would only make me a logic to me. So if you took had a look on my laptop, this one, and tried to find out where I keep this document, this video that I'm talking to you about, it might not make sense to you, but it makes sense to me. And that's where you've got to work it as well. If you're doing handwritten, as I said, get a book, really. It really makes a lot of difference. Or some people like to use files as well, and they can make sections, that's fine. But I always fear the floating bit of paper that gets lost. So try to think on that. Bring your file, stick things away straight away. Close the loop. If you miss something, give yourself a space to come back to it. You might have to speak to one of your other students and say, like, oh, did you get that bit? You know, I really didn't get that. Leave yourself a space for it. And then you can look it up, really. Or if the lecturer gives you the video, you can go back and check it, and then you're only filling in the gaps, really. And put your notes to work. Don't just write them and put them on the shelf and think, okay, that's that lot done. Never going to see them again. I mean, we often sort of say that, really, but we shouldn't. The purpose of note taking is to have something to go back to, and you can reread it and you can test yourself on it. They're great for revision, as I said. You can create your own little flashcards. You can create quizzes for yourself and maybe some of your fellow students. There was a study in Science magazine that said students who practiced and repeated their study material performed inferiorly to those who underwent repeated testing. So that doesn't make any sense, but what they're saying is people who just sort of watched the video over and over again or read things over and over again, they didn't do as well as people who are actually testing themselves with their notes. So I certainly know that one of my my study ways is to read and write notes out a few times at revision time. That's my way. I like to see the word rewritten, and I will constantly rewriting it, re-paraphrasing, re-summarizing, changing the language of it every time, so I haven't got this sort of exact paragraph stuck in my head. I understand it so well that I can write it a few different ways. That's my style. But a lot of people love to test themselves with flashcards, which they use from their notes. So again, you will work out the way that works for you. And we'll be looking at revision, exam revision, and preparation for that in a later session. Okay, why handwritten? I've said a little bit about that already. There is some study that handwritten notes do promote a lot of recall. 67 students studied at Princeton said that they perform better on conceptual questions with those who compared to those who've taken notes on their laptop. So bear that in mind. There's something about the actual process of writing rather than typing, because when you type, you don't actually absorb as much. And the study has proved that. The other good thing about handwriting notes is there's your notebook, there's your pen, that's all you've got going on. That and the lecturer sitting up there. When you've got your tablet up and you're knocking them away, you've got your notifications popping up. You've got something popping up from YouTube. You've got something, all the things that you follow just popping up in the corner. I mean, you could either switch all that off, but I'm just sort of letting you know. You've got texts coming, you've got WhatsApps coming. That can really be distracting. Now, those of you who do, who swear by your digital notes, fine. I mean, if you work for you and you've got the discipline to not get distracted by your phone and go, oh, I just better see what, she's saying. She obviously wants to go out this evening. I would be terrible at that, so I'm quite happy to do it with my written notes. But, it's up to you really, but do think about it. Benefits of going digital is especially nowadays at your generation, you will be faster. Especially if you're using a laptop to type it out than handwrite generally. And it also you can move things around and you can constantly come back and add. So you can actually build up quite a nice sort of set of folders. So if you go and do something on haematology in like a few months' time, and you think, oh, I want to link it to the haematology lecture that I did in February, then you can do that very easily with your digital notes. You can either copy it in, so you've got a copy in both areas, or you can just make connections to it. So that is the benefit of it. And one of the interesting thing was in praise of bad fonts, I've put here. It's been suggested that you choose a hard to read font, which it sounds a bit sort of counterintuitive, like why would you do that? But there's been 2 studies that have supported the fact that if you use a difficult to read font, such as something like Comic Sans, most people find quite difficult to read, when people have actually, because they've had to focus quite hard on it and think about it, um, that the information that they tend to remember better. Um, that surprised me, but that is what the study says. Rather than using, our classic Arial Times New Roman, which so many of us default to. But it says, yeah, the harder it is to read, the more you remember. So use a font you hate. Okay, we're going to look at some of the different sort of models or styles of note taking now. There are many, and I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to go through 3 or 4 of the most well-known ones, most commonly used ones, and the ones that a lot of universities recommend to you. So when you go off to uni, there'll be quite a lot of information coming out of the study skills department, and a lot of them will be sort of suggesting the different note-taking styles. So I just want you to sort of get used to them. Some of you may well have done this before and may already be using them. That's cool. But those of you who haven't, this can be useful. So one of the most common ones is known as the outline model or style. And it's probably the most commonly used note-taking method for most people. And it involves titles, bullet points, and sort of little numbered lists, really. And you use indenting to demonstrate sort of the relationships. So you can hear my example, and the same example I'll use all the way through is abdominal distension. So you've got a few points, which is as your lecturer starts to talk about abdominal distension, they may sort of define it. So a couple of bullet points. It means enlargement of the lip of the abdomen. It could be generalized or localized. That means it could be everywhere or it could be in a specific place. Okay. And then you'll put some headings. So and then some sort of lesser bullet points under that. So causes, fat, feces. Now this is this is known as the 7 points. So you'll get this a bit later on. Fat, feces, flatulous fluid, and fetus. And the last one is mass. But you'll see that they've managed to create another F for that, and I'll show you that to you later. So the outline one is quite simple, really. It's headings, bullet points, lesser headings, lesser bullet points, and you sort of jiggle down and just get it down. And sometimes you might write little bits around it, or sometimes you might stick with the bullet points. Okay, so tips for writing in outline. Trying to start by structuring your headings. Use a lecture outline or textbook tables of content. So if you've got an outline of your lecture, which you might have, or you might even have your slides already before you go into your lecture, you can use that outline to sort of create a skeleton, and then you can fill it in when you get more detail. Make sure the titles and headers are nice and clear, and paraphrase your information when you write your bullet point into fairly short phrases. Do avoid copying information word for word. As I said, you can't really do it in the outline, so it's all about paraphrasing. And make sure there's a clear information hierarchy. And the hierarchy, I mean, is that you've got the big headings and then indent to know that something is actually related to that one. And then when you start a new topic, you go back to the main bullet point heading and then you indent again to show that that is related to the one above, that is related to the one above. One of the problems about outlines, it can be difficult to use if you're adding a lot of images or formulas. It can end up getting really messy and not really being that clear. So you need to think about what sort of lecture that you're attending and will it work for you. The next method we're going to look at is the Cornell method, and this is very popular, used all over the world actually, although it was invented by Cornell University in the US. It's quite a simple thing. It's a page that's drawn into three sections, like a sort of slightly lopsided T. You can actually buy notebooks like this. For those people who are going to do tons and tons of notes, you can get your Cornell notebooks printed up, so you don't have to draw the lines. I used to manage to draw the lines with a ruler, but if you want them like that, you can pay for them. So it's in three sections, as I said. On the right side is the outline that explains some of the key ideas. On the left side are keywords and questions, and those are really there to stimulate your recall. At the bottom of every page, there's a brief summary where you pull it all together. Okay, and you can do that quite fast. Very helpful, the Cornell method for revision, because you've got keywords on the side asking you questions. You've got the sort of summary of information, and I think it's that bottom summary that really sort of people find very helpful. So here we're sticking with our abdominal distension again. Very nice. And the questions are: what is it? Where is it? What are the causes? So you've got a definition: enlargement of the abdomen. Where is it? Well, it can be generalized or localized, as before. And your causes are fat, feces, flatus, fluid, fetus. And there's the final F, the filthy big tumor. And that was actually put on by, and that was actually created by one of the Californian universities a long time ago, med schools. So you've got the F's, the 6 F's, and that made it a lot easier for people to remember. So adding filthy in front of the tumour or mass, it's funny, more people always remembered it for their exams than they didn't, So fat, feces, flatulence, fluid, fetus, and filthy big tumour. Okay, you can see it, can't you, really? It's how it sticks with you a bit more. Okay, the next style we're going to look at is mind mapping. Some of you may well have done this before. You may have used it during your A levels, such like. And it's really particularly good for people who are visual learners, who like to use graphics more than lots of words. The bubbles tend to help people see things in their right place. It's you need to draw the lines. So in the center, you've got your 6 F's of abdominal distension: your fat, your flatus, your fluid, pregnancy or fetus, feces and mass or filthy big tumour. So then you've got your nice proper 6 F's. And it mimics the way the brain works. We process information and memories in terms of relationships rather than in order. So it doesn't really surprise you, think, if you're having a lecture and when you try to recall it, you might not say, what did she say 5 minutes before the last thing? But if you say, oh, what were the 6 F's? You've got more chance of remembering it, really. There's been a lot of study. There was a lot of, people saying, oh, well, the listed notes or writing a text is better because there's more detail in it than mind mapping. Done a lot of research on it, actually, and it works. Obviously, some people like mind mapping more than others, as I said, those who like visual learners. But in a study of 131 med students, there was no significant difference between the group that uses standard note taking and the mind mappers, what they remembered and what they wrote. So it can be very good for complex topics because you can have lots of blobs, or you can have a couple of groups of blobs and then they can join into the center. And you can change maps and edit them. You can actually even get mind mapping software now for your laptop as well. If you wanted to sort of switch into that, like we switch into PowerPoint, you can actually switch into a mind mapping software. And that's really very useful because it looks nicer than the ones we draw. They can become a bit difficult to use when the concepts, if you're having a lecture where the concepts don't relate that well to each other, you end up having like 4 mind maps that are sort of isolated, so you're not getting connections. And obviously, if there are a lot of issues raised, you tend to only have an A4 page if you're drawing a mind map, so it can get a bit too much, and you probably want a huge sheet, and that can be really hard to follow. Even if you try and sort of do something with it. Although I have known people who've created posters for certain things for revision, and they've actually sort of joined up a lot of their mind maps for, say, like if they're doing homeostasis or something, they might have all the different processes. But I've known people to turn it into posters, and that works for them. The next one we're looking at really is flow, and this is what I think is a slightly like a mind map, but slightly developed. And personally, I think flow is more effective than the straight mind map. It's a sort of a combination really of the ones that follow on with the hierarchy and drawing it in that sort of blobby way, really. It is a visual representation again, so it's good for the visual learners who prefer graphics. So it's topic based rather than hierarchical, and it you can learn because rather than writing down just what the lecturer has said, there's a lot more active processing going on when you're doing this. So when you're writing your flow-based notes, you're sort of listening and paying attention, and then you just put down the key concepts in as few words as possible. You draw arrows that join up the concepts and the related ideas, and then you can sort of highlight important concepts in real time. And it stops you having to write stuff where it gets repeated as well. So if you have a look in this one, it's sort of handwritten one. So started off with add those distension, and then we talked about the 6 F's, and then they've drawn the lines out, and they've identified the 6 F's again, and then they've drawn some other lines out of it, sort of saying what could be the causes of that, really. So here you've got fat. Well, the causes of that is obesity. That's sort of obvious. But feces, causes of that is constipation, fetus, pregnancy, flatus, obstruction or IBS, fluid, that could be ascites in the liver. It could be some issues with blood. The filthy big tumour is cancer, or it could be fibrosis. It could be a benign tumour, but a bowling ball fibrosis, really. So you could actually keep going out with that, or if you put something that was just connected to one of them, say connected to fluid, you could actually draw some other flow charts from there, where you might be talking a bit, if the lecturer has gone into talking, focusing on some of those. It does again rely on sort of paper not getting too large, and it can be messy. It depends how you draw them, but you might miss some details because you're so busy making your connections, although the learning aspect of that is very good. And as I say, very often you've got your lecture as a recorded piece anyway, so you can go back and fill in gaps and make those connections. But the process of making the connection is supposed to help the information stick with you. So those are a few of the main examples. There are lots more. I've done a little link for you because there's a good few more note-taking methods. Although the ones I've talked about are the most popular, most commonly used. But what I'd like you to do is to try and use a few of these different ones. You might already do them and say, oh God, I've been doing that for years. Fine. But how about having a go at one that you maybe have never used and see, maybe do a bit of comparisons. Does it work well for you? It sometimes depends on the lecture. And you might find, and if you sort of get to know your tutor and you know the style of your lecture, you might think actually, well, that one will work for a mind map, but I'll need to do the listed hierarchy for this guy. You know, if it's got a lot more statistics in it, one thing won't work. If there's too many concepts, the maps get messy. So I think try out a few different ones and see what works. As I said, you might find that the one you've been using is good and you want to stick to it, or you might want to use one day and one another day, depending on the style of the lecture. Or you might find that there's a model that makes, really helps you retain more information than the model that you've been using. So while you're in the middle of your studies, but in the early stages really of your sort of graduate career, give it a go. Now's the time to learn about what really works for you. Okay. So for the assignment, as I already mentioned, this assignment is going to be a portfolio, and you are going to, you can do it over a period of time. There will be a final hand-in date, but you can hand bits in earlier. You have to produce a portfolio, and there are going to be 5 different separate uploads for the 5 different learning objectives that we're going to approach. Okay, which I'm going to be addressing with some of these little sessions. You can draw in evidence produced from other units taken on your course. You don't need to create something new for this. You should be able to find it elsewhere. So for example, say this note-taking session, any notes that you create, you just decide which one you're going to put forward, and photograph it and upload it. So you need to sort of structure your portfolio in 5 sections. We're going to do that for you. We're going to have 5 places for you to upload: section 1, section 2, section 3, with the right title, so you know where to put things. And as I said, you can put them in as you go along. You can hand them all in at the end. That's a bit more work for me to do right at the end, just before you finish your course. But what I would suggest you do is do a little bits while you're working on other units, because you can put them up, and if I see them there, I'll pop in and I'll mark them. Okay. Now this is an ungraded but has to be done unit, so you do need to pass them, but you won't get a grade for them. So what I'll do is I'll mark them, but it does give you a chance, if you haven't done it very well, or if you haven't really met the criteria, to resubmit it. So that's why I'm saying I can mark them as you go along, and then we'll just be doing the last few right at the end. Okay, it is really up to you, but I believe it's more useful for you to do it as you go along. The other thing is that some of the subjects will have an effect on other things. So if you're more confident with note taking once you've had a practice with it, then you might improve your note taking for other parts of the course that you're doing. There's going to be one on academic writing, which hopefully might help enhance your essay writing. And I would suggest you do that one, because it will affect where your essays are graded or your assignments are graded. If you've got exams, so doing the revision planning one is quite useful as well. So as you can see, it will go through the time, but really in the end it's up to you. As long as it's all put in by the final closing date, there will be a closing date for it, but we are going to give you a nice spread out time. Okay, so just for this piece, because this is going to be section 1, you're going to produce 2 brief sets of notes. Not loads and loads of words, please. Just 2 sets of notes that total to a maximum of 250 words total, please. It can be from a lecture that's been provided in college or virtually, for any of the units that you've already done, say like from a chemistry or a biology lecture, or it could be from a YouTube video you've been asked to have a look at. So mix it up a bit, really. Give me 2 different styles if you want, because it's quite nice to see the way you write your notes on those. They can be provided using one more of the following. I've identified the Cornell method, the sentence method, the outline method, the mapping method, charting method, and mind mapping. So as you know, I haven't addressed all of those here, because you're only going to pick 2. So I've given you a few, but if you're really interested in one of the other ones, I gave you a link for you to have a look at, and where you can see a lot more of them. Any concerns, contact me. But like I said, as soon as the slot goes up for you, you can do this. Or you can find some of your other notes. I mean, you might have already taken copious notes in one of those styles. Well, fine, just stick them up and then I'll mark them. Okay? So that's pretty much it. And I will see you for the next session, which is about reliable sources and literature reviews. Okay, thank you and goodbye.